Hello, my name is Robert Jamison. I'm coordinator of school counseling services here in Virginia Beach, and I'm eager and excited to speak with you today. Is in Wake County Public Schools, I've heard that there's great things occurring in your school division or in your county. I know that this is put together as a way to support families during the pandemic, and they were asked to provide some vignettes or really some testimonials as a little bit about personal stories, how we're making things work in these difficult times. And as I was hearing that, I thought maybe I could share a little bit about some personal stories for myself related to goals, plans, and commitment, and some things I've learned along the way, really from a very personal standpoint, that might help maybe in some way, shape, or form, whether through motivation or inspiration or just, perspective from somebody else. So I wanted to just take an opportunity and through this, I guess, conversation/presentation, just to share with you a little bit more about me and what really brought me to this opportunity to be speaking with you today. And so in terms of the audience and learning intentions, the session is designed for parents, guardians, and caretakers. And during this session, I hope that you'll connect with the personal stories that I share, consider how motivation comes in various forms, and review some potential guiding questions for goal setting. So a little bit different in terms of maybe things that you could be doing or should be doing. If you get a chance to watch the other two videos that I put together, definitely speak to that more so with those two. But this one, just to maybe share a little bit about how we all come from different backgrounds and we have so many different experiences, and how it can lead to things in our lives that maybe we never thought might be possible. So I just wanted to share that with you today. And I will tell you, I don't intend for anything to be a trigger. I will share some sensitive information of things that I've experienced and lived through, but I share them in ways of maybe my own personal healing, and perhaps a way for you to hear some things and process them on your own and see where it takes you from there. But I appreciate you letting me engage in that kind of conversation and being honest with you, albeit from a distance, and this is being recorded, but it can live on and hopefully serve as a purpose for someone. So jumping in, as you can imagine, this knock-kneed gentleman to your left is me at about age 4. And on the right is a picture of my brother and I as we sat, or a picture of my brother and me, really, as we sat on the front stoop of our home or our house. We grew up military. My dad was in the military for a good while. And Fort Eustis was where we were first stationed, at least as I came into this world, we were stationed at the time. And this, as they say, humble beginnings. This was home. I'm obviously not going to share additional pictures of what inside looked like, but the picture of me on the left is from the front stoop looking out. And obviously that's us from where essentially I was standing in that 4-year-old picture looking in. And the part about it not wanting to be a trigger, but just being open and honest with you, I'm a child of an alcoholic. Lived in a home with domestic violence, verbal abuse, and really the humble beginnings of really not having a lot of money, unfortunately. And so with all that, a lot of things definitely happened in our house that I struggled with trying to make sense of, and how that was going to, manifest really as I got to school and what that would be like. And so coming up, school was kind of the escape for me. And it really became an opportunity for me to get away from the home experience and just completely almost forget that that was what it was, and really became just engrossed in school. And school can be such a positive place for students. And I was one of those people, like, looking for some normalcy, looking for a routine, looking for safety, looking for some structure, and knowing what's to come, and being able to understand without surprises happening, from one moment to the next, that we're in a good spot. And so, thankfully my mom, she had instilled in us early on that school was important. Doing well in school was very important. And that was kind of my understanding. Like, if I do well in school, it can take me places, and I believed in it. And thankfully I had some teachers, even when I was in Fort Eustis, which is in Newport News, Virginia, that they were there to navigate and help with that too. And so I say that because you have schools now in Wake County that are looking to do the same for students, regardless of their background. And we eventually left Fort Eustis when I was in kindergarten. and moved on to Virginia Beach, actually. And I attended, and I can say the names of schools. I guess it's okay, right? John B. Dye Elementary School, Great Neck Middle School, and then Cox High School. And so military installation, we were within a school zone that was somewhat diverse. Most of the military kids were within that section. All those from the Army installation, being Fort Story, which is now a Joint Expeditionary Base, Little Creek. But then Little Creek at the time was all Navy, still is. And we had a good group of kids, especially in middle school, high school, elementary, a little bit different. John B. Dye definitely had some experiences where I was the only person of color within a grade level and trying to navigate those waters, which kind of helped with some of my own understanding of how things would be. So being that I was kind of looked at as different, but at the same time, wanting to do well in school and knowing what was going on at home, always trying to balance what things could be or how things could go. And the fact that school was such a big area of focus, I wanted it to take me places. So I'll share a few stories related to that, because when I transitioned from Fort Eustis to Fort Story and we left Newport News and we went to Virginia Beach, my mom had done a great job of trying to make sure I was ready for school, so being able to add and subtract and almost multiply and divide, but I was going into kindergarten. When I was in Newport News, there was the thought of me maybe skipping a grade. But then when I got to John B. Dye, or Virginia Beach, that just didn't happen. For whatever AB reason, it didn't happen. And so remained in kindergarten, but really wanted to always impress and do well. And I was thankful enough as I got through that to have teachers, like I shared before, that were very caring and wanting to do what was right by students. And even though I looked different, I still felt loved throughout that process. And again, I'm hoping the same and I'm expecting the same is occurring in Wake County, and that the teachers are doing the same for their students. I bring that up because I was a product of Virginia Beach City Public Schools. I went on to the University of Virginia, had an academic scholarship there, and definitely didn't know how things were going to play out. And as I was reflecting on them, those experiences and reading, came across this book, which is The Other Westmore. And Westmore, there's, two gentlemen by the same name. And one of them, they both grew up in similar areas just outside of Baltimore, really on the outskirts of Baltimore. And the one Westmore went on to live a very different life than the other Westmore. One ended up in prison, one ended up working for the government. And the one who was working for the government kept being asked, like, oh, you're from Baltimore. Are you Westmore? And he would say, no, I'm the other Westmore. So eventually he found the other Westmore. And when he found him, he was in prison already, unfortunately. And so the book itself it's essentially three stories. It's the story of the Westmore who ended up in prison, again, unfortunately, the story of Westmore who ended up working for the government and doing other great things, and then their interactions in prison. So when he went to go visit him, he did interviews and he essentially recounted what those interviews were. And I wanted to share this. This stood out to me in terms of just some of what I experienced growing up. So the Westmore who was not in prison said, do you think we're all just products of our environments? The Westmore in prison, I think so, or maybe products of our expectations. And as you can see, others' expectations of us or our expectations for ourselves. And then the Westmore in prison said, well, I mean, others' expectations that you take on as your own. And the Westmore, again, not in prison, shared how I realized then how the expectations that others place on us help us form our expectations for ourselves. And this really rung true. So many times throughout high school and going into working at a residential treatment center for adolescents after I got out of college, I found myself wondering what expectations that I really have for myself, what expectations that people have for me. And, there was one story in particular as I was helping a student coming out of college, as I said, worked at a residential treatment center. And that was a humbling experience, to say the least. But I then moved on, connected with a mentor of mine, which will connect with a story in just a second, and ended up becoming a tutor at the high school from which I graduated. And so I was working with this one student, and it took, math was my thing, science was my thing. So when they said, oh, you'll be a math tutor, I was like, oh, no problem. So I go in there, I'm working with the young lady, and I'm thinking, this isn't that hard. We'll make it work. I learned really quickly, again, another humbling experience. Don't assume what it's going to be like for someone else. And she let me know. I was like, no, I don't understand what you're talking about. I'm like, how do you not understand what I'm talking about? And that really went back and forth for a good 2-3 weeks. And then finally it dawned on me, I should probably stop and ask some questions. And so in doing so, I found out that she didn't know how to multiply. We were simply trying to do 2x equals 6. She had no idea what any of that meant, let alone when I said 6 divided by 2. She's like, I don't know how to add. She's like, I don't know how to multiply or divide. That really caused me to change my approach with her and how things were going to work out. So with that in mind, I then, kind of turned the corner with her, and things were starting to work out well. She was coming in excited to get work done. And then one day she just shut down, and she was like, what's the point anyway? And I was like, where's this coming from? And so she then shared with me how someone had told her she might as well just drop out and get her GED. I was like, man, like we had just gained so much ground in trying to get her to where she was engaged in school, for that to just fall apart. And I'm reflecting on this quote as I'm sharing with you about expectations. And she's like, you know what? If others are going to have those expectations for me, essentially, I might as well live up to that. And it was at that moment that it really started to sink in for me that I needed to get into education. So I didn't share this before on the front end, but I wanted to share with you, that triggering moment for me of education is where I need to be. And I really wanted to focus on how I could help others. And I decided to go back to school to be a school counselor. I ended up being a school counselor for 1 year, school counseling department chair. So in that first year, they promoted me to be in charge of the department for the next 4 years, and they kind of progressed from there. I don't mean that to come off as like, hey, he did these things, but that's just how it played out. So in doing the lesson, as I was a school counselor at the school, at the high school, excuse me, I started to do a lesson on goal setting for students. And some of what that lesson is, I'm sharing with you today. And I went in and started talking about what does it take to be an expert, and how many hours of practice does it take to really be an expert at something. And students, reflect for a second. Are you an expert at something, or anyone really, as we're engaging in this presentation? What are you an expert at doing? So I want you to think about that for a second. What are you an expert at doing? And as you're reflecting on that, I'll tell you that many studies have come out sharing that it takes 10,000 hours to be an expert at something. And I would tell the 14, 15-year-olds in the room, like, you've been alive for about 131,400 hours, and 10,000 of those hours would have been spent doing something in order for you to be deemed an expert at it. Now, I don't necessarily agree with that. I think we all come in with various levels of talent, different ways of practice, like good practice versus just activity, and not confusing activity for practice. So all those things come into play. And so I'm sharing this with the students because, in essence, I wanted them to think through, so what do you do well? Because if you feel like you're an expert, that means you spent some time doing it. You got a lot of answers, everything from Xbox to PlayStation, playing basketball, whatever it might be. And then so I would try to reflect back for them. There's other things that you might be experts at, think about it. Like, you might be an expert sleeper, you don't know. Expert at eating, don't know. Talking about those 10,000 hours. We might be experts at breathing and not know. So there's different things that we could be experts at doing as you start to reflect on what the 10,000 hours might mean. So the parents, adults, caretakers who might be listening to this, you should do the same. Reflect on what it is you believe you're an expert at doing, and then really believe in that, right? And so I want to share another story with you in relation to those expectations, because as I shared growing up, thankfully I had trusting teachers, loving teachers, but there was always this inherent background of, I'm afraid of failing. So the expectation that I may have allowed to creep into my mind is that I'm going to eventually fail. And I will tell you, if you ever can make it to Virginia Beach and you're in the Red Mill Commons section, it's a shopping center towards the southeastern part of Virginia Beach, corner of Upton and Nemo Parkway, there's a gas station. And at 23 years old, having graduated from high school, graduated from UVA, had an academic scholarship, I will tell you that that day, sitting in that gas station, I had to, at the time, being that you didn't have apps, to tell you a little bit about my age, I had to call essentially my bank to make sure, the automated teller on the phone, to make sure I had enough money for gas. And in that moment, I decided I'm not doing this anymore. Like, I'm not going to live like that. I had a job, don't get me wrong. It was when I was working at that residential treatment center. But the fact that I had maybe gone awry or just wasn't focused in what I was doing enough to where I had to be calling to make sure I had enough money for gas completely changed how I wanted to approach things. And so it was actually from that conversation that I made the decision to call that mentor at my school, who then got me the job as the tutor that I was just telling you about with that young lady, which brings me to that next part of the story with working with her. My goal that moment at the gas station was, I just need to make money and I need to get my life back on track and staying focused to what I believe I should be doing. Didn't know what that should be just yet. Bring me to the story working with that young lady. What I should be doing then started to kick in, right? So going back to school after that, going to school for 2 years, and as I shared, then getting the position, school counselor and then department chair. But I want to bring you back, and I know I'm going back and forth with stories, hoping that will keep you a little more engaged with what I'm saying. But I want to bring you to something that happened. So go to school, get my master's degree, get the first interview for a job. It's at the same school where I've been tutoring. I was coaching also at the same time. And, I go to the local store to get, an outfit. I need a shirt, tie, want to dress the part and look put together for my interview, that I cared about how the first impression, and that I took the time to coordinate that outfit. I wanted them to understand that it was important to me. So I get home and I getting ready for the interview, and it dawns on me, I don't know how to tie a tie. And I will tell you, it was a rather frustrating moment, because for whatever reason, in that moment, everything about those humble beginnings kind of smacked me in the face. Like, again, here's another example of things you were never taught. Here's another example of how you're not really ready to make these things happen. Here's another example of fill in the blank. And I became extremely frustrated. And I asked the students, so in that same lesson, going back to the lesson now, so in the lesson where I'm talking about goal setting, I share this story with them. And I share the story of, what do you think I did in that moment? We talk about being experts. What are they an expert at doing? Obviously, I was not an expert at tying a tie. What do you think I did? And many of the kids are like, you Googled it. And I was like, you're right, I did. And that day, I was looking at YouTube, trying to go back and forth and how I was going to make this work and how I was going to make this fit. And so I figured it out, right? Like, you hit that moment of, what am I going to do to address the problem that's essentially glaring me in the face? I can either wilt and walk away from it, or choose not to wear a tie and I go into the interview and they think less of me because they're thinking I did not care enough to come in well dressed for the interview. Or you do exactly what you said you set out to do, which is be presentable and ready to go going into the interview. So I will tell you, learn how to tie a tie. And to this day, every time I see a tie, it becomes something almost like a symbol of what I experienced, and the fact that you can overcome certain challenges in, that face you on a day-to-day. And so in doing so, I am nowhere near an expert really at anything, in my opinion. I really don't believe that. But I know that if you put your time to something and you get a moment to practice, and you practice well, and I say this to the kids in terms of tying the tie, that you get to a point where you can do it well, right? And I bring all that up, and I say it to the kids, and after in that lesson. So again, as a school counselor in the building, school counseling department chair in the building, wanting to lead a lesson on goal setting, I'm in there working with students, and the lesson from goal setting turns into how to tie a tie and learning some different life skills, all related to expectations, and all related from the expectations that I felt were placed upon me, sitting at that gas station, to then working with that young lady and wondering how I was going to make a difference in this world, to then trying to be ready for my interview. Thankfully, that interview worked out, obviously, and then getting that job and doing what I needed to do, to then be leading that lesson with students I reflect on that process often, and maybe that's what I'm doing today with you, just reflecting on that process, because I will tell you from that interaction, I landed on this process. So the goal setting that I shared with those students during that school counseling lesson became essentially these guiding questions. What is your goal? What is your plan to achieve your goal? And how committed are you to your goal? Are you willing to make all the necessary sacrifices to achieve your goal? And I will tell you, the first two bullets or the first two questions you see are the ones that people usually are able to do. So I'll ask students, I'm like, hey, what's your goal? And they'd be real quick to tell me, oh, you just want me to say what what they think I want to hear. And I'm like, that's not why I'm here. My goal is actually to hear from you. I want to know what you want to accomplish so I can help you, because I want to make sure that you have a plan to achieve whatever it is that you want to achieve. So then I would ask them, what's your plan? And they would need to talk me through that. So my kids knew, if you see me in the hallway, I'm going to ask you what's your goal, and I'm going to ask you what's the plan to achieve that goal. Whether how big or small it might be, you need to be able to tell me that you have one. If not, we're going to sit down and figure one out. For that day, you're going to do your homework. Whatever the goal is, we're going to focus on it. And then the plan to achieve that goal. Then the last one is really where we start to make a difference in terms of who's really going to achieve their goals, because how committed are you? And growing up, I will tell you, the fact that I was sitting at that gas station and I didn't know if I had enough money in my account, that I was not committed to my goal, let alone I'm not even certain that I had a goal in that moment, let alone a plan to achieve anything. And I obviously wasn't committed to much because I wasn't saving money the way I should have been. So lessons learned in that. So I go back and I share that with students, because those are mistakes that I made along the way that I would never want them to have to experience. So back to goal setting. So students, I will tell them, if your goal is to go to college, awesome. What's your plan to get there? What courses are we taking? How hard are you working? Are you then to this next bullet? I'm sorry, courses you're going to take, where are you going to work? Where are you applying? When are you going to apply? And we start to hammer out the plan for that. And then how committed to your goal are you? Then we're going to need to know. That means that on a Saturday, you might be staying in while everybody's going out. And on a Wednesday, when other people are telling you, hey, why don't you jump on, fill in the blank, like, why weren't you on Instagram? Or I missed you. You haven't posted anything on TikTok. How come you weren't playing with me on PS5? Whatever it might be, you might have to miss out on those things because you recognize the importance of your goal. I'm speaking to students because that's what I would say to them in that moment. But as adults, we're in the same exact boat, especially in the difficult times that we're in right now. So whatever goals you have, big or small, running every errand on your checklist. Maybe the goal is to have a checklist, and then the plan is to every morning create said checklist, and then making sure that you set an alarm to be committed to making your checklist in the morning so that you have enough time. All of those things come into play. And it thankfully has worked out in ways, these questions, that I hope could maybe benefit you as you move forward in anything that you're doing right now. Again, however big or small, and hopefully it's something that's really straightforward, like in that you can make those decisions of saving money for a present for your children, saving money for a present for yourself, maybe the future vacation that you need and deserve because of all the hard work that you're putting in. And the other piece I'm sharing today is that this will pay off. I will tell you, picture on the left, first day of school. I don't know why my mom dressed me that way. Maybe I told her I wanted to dress that way. I don't recall that. But apparently, the double polo, and thought I was looking good. Picture on the right was the day I got my second master's degree from Old Dominion University. And I say that or share this because picture on the left, had no idea how life was going to play out. Was taking on others' expectations all the time. Wasn't certain that I was really committed to doing anything the right way, kind of more of a follower. And as time has gone on, to a point to where I can speak to students and hopefully speak with people like yourselves today, that you take something from this and that you do things that you never imagined. And sharing that, I will share these things with you. So top left, by staying committed to doing my job, so to speak, I was able to be, I was nominated for an award with the US Navy, and my reward for that award was flying with the Blue Angels. As you see there, when I was named as the guidance director, really school counseling chair, and then I was the counselor of the year for technical and career education. People find this picture of me coaching funny. So yes, that's me leading a warm-up with students. The bottom right is me leading a presentation in Tennessee related to equity and diversity, and the headline that you see in the middle, related work, but one didn't necessarily lead to the other, was that I was appointed by our previous governor to serve on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission that sparked from what occurred in Charlottesville. Having been a UVA grad, not that the two opportunities were connected, it just kind of rang true back to things sometimes just work out when opportunities match hard work, and we go from there. The two pictures below that are pictures of football players. One, number 41, DJ DiNardo. He ended up playing at Virginia Tech, doing great things now, living locally and trying to make things happen. And then the picture on the left, underneath there, number 6, was our quarterback who went on to William and Mary. Actually got a chance to see him get married not too long ago. So, and opportunities, just those different things of being there for others. And of course, not to leave it out. Those are my 2 daughters on the left, Isabel and Evelyn. So I'm sharing all these things with you because I'll even jump back to this. From these humble beginnings, at no point in time did I think I would get to this point to where I'd even have opportunities to speak with Wake County or speak with anyone, let alone anyone wanting to listen. So again, I hope some of this is beneficial, because staying true to what we believe needs to happen, however difficult the times are, and these are definitely difficult times, we have to look for the best things, that are available to us, and really wanting to see that bright side if it exists. And this is one season with multiple opportunities, right? So everyone's been like, this time is horrible. Like, time is indefinite, not quite certain. Seasons end and seasons change, which is why I put seasons in this. But be committed to your goals and look for ways to make the most of this experience. And that's every day. So, and in these other videos that I've created, I've talked about, winning the day, and those goals that I talked about here. What goals do you have? What are your plans for those goals? And how committed are you to it? Are you willing to make all the necessary sacrifices? In hearing of some of the stories from families in Wake County, I know that you are. I know that you're doing your best, and know that your best is awesome, and that you have opportunities to do more. As time goes on, it's a difficult spot now. And if you're doing all that you can, then that's the best that we can get. And that's the best that you can do, and being okay with that. I know right now that I'm definitely not necessarily engaged in everything that I want to have happen, but I'm doing my best to keep my goals in mind, that I have plans for those goals, and I'm trying to stay committed as possible to those. So trying to keep this to right around 30 minutes. I'm sure I've gone over. I hope you've taken something from it, just from the different things that have come up in my life. The challenges that I have faced, I'm sure, are similar to the challenges that you have faced. And if they're not, then just consider it an opportunity to have heard somebody else's story, and hopefully, entice you to want to do more. And I'm definitely here in any way, shape, or form that I can be, for follow-up. So thank you so much for this opportunity, and hopefully our paths can connect in some time in the near future.